Uh, Thank you so much, Diana, for reading that. It seems as though every time I hear it, it has a new meaning in the context of whatever topic we're taking up. And so there seems to be such a strong devotional quality to that reading as we go into this conversation of Shri Hanuman, devoted, who seems to be such a perfect embodiment of bhakti yoga. We're so fortunate to have with us Ram Dass Lam. Ram Dass was in India for almost a decade, where he lived an ascetic life. He was in a very ascetic monastic tradition, a Vaishnava tradition. And so the story of Ram is, I know, very, very near and dear to his heart. He also, as a professor of religious studies, is someone who has become so deeply um, conversant with this ancient epic tale from India that he has been asked to come to India and speak to the Indians on some of the meaning and symbology of the Ramayana. So we are truly fortunate and blessed to have Ram Dass be with us today and speak on Shri Hanuman. So Ram Dass, if you would, we'd love to hear from you.
First of all, Renee, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who is here. You're going to have to excuse my throat. I've had bronchitis for a bit, and I'm just getting to the end stages of it. But so that's going to happen a little bit. Anyway, very briefly, I was briefly in India on a trip. I did a 3-week trip to India when I was a teenager, and I saw a Hanuman temple, and it totally changed my life. And that's another story. But anyway, it did. I came back knowing that I had to go back to India. Following year, was able to go back. And then, as Renee said, I was there for about a decade. And have remained in contact with the monastic order that I joined ever since that time. So called the Ramananda Sampradaya, and that is the monastic order that has really promoted the concept of Hanuman more than any other group in India because of what Hanumanji represents. So just very, very briefly, and there's so many names to Hanuman, it's amazing. He is the son of Shiva. He's the son of the wind. He's the son of Kesari. He is the son of Anjani. I mean, there's all these different names, and the one name that's obviously very strong within my monastic order, but also in South India, is Bajranga Bali, which means he who has a body like lightning. And so this idea of physical strength is very much there, but the purpose of physical strength is to fulfill devotion. And so he uses all his energy to do the work of Ram, to fulfill whatever. And so there's stories of him never sleeping and these kinds of things. The idea that when you are focused, you can accomplish anything. And so that's really what he symbolizes to so many people. One of the things that I've worked a lot in central India and in northern India. So I go back and forth sometimes, and I'll be in a car, sometimes I'll be on a bus, and I'll travel for maybe couple hundred kilometers at a time. And one of the things I'll do is I'll go along the road, and whenever I see a shrine, I'll mark down, I'll count them and who it belonged to. And a Hanuman shrine is easy to spot. And it's so interesting in central and northern India, 75% of all the Hindu religious structures, and they can be small shrines that are like 2 foot by 4 foot, or they can be huge temples. But of all of them, about 75% are to Hanuman. So 3/4 of all of them are to Hanuman. And it's because Hanuman has such power in the hearts and minds of the local people. because he represents for them, he's simple. I mean, the idea he's not a human, he's subhuman, but what does that mean? Humility. So I don't have to be fancy. I don't have to be high caste. I don't have to be all this stuff. All I need is devotion, and devotion is what gives me strength. And so that's why he's so I mean, that's why so many people love him. The monks call themselves, like in the order, they call themselves the monkey army. And so we are all devotees of Hanuman. Why? Because Hanuman guides us. And remember, Hanuman is also Shiva. Shiva is the great yogi. And so you use your yogic powers to first, and he is the destroyer, right? Shiva is the destroyer. So what does he destroy? The ego. So when the ego is destroyed, only then can you truly fulfill your duty as servant, as devotee, fulfilling the fulfilling the fulfilling your devotion. There's two verses I want to mention to you. In the Ananda Ramayana, which is a very old Ramayana, it's in Sanskrit. And and I know Renee sent around a little thing from, I think it was Valmiki Ramayana, when Ram and Hanumanji first met. But in the Ananda Ramayana, it's really interesting because they first meet there, and Ram says to him, "Who are you?" And he says, "As a body, I am your servant. As an individual soul, I am an extension of you. But as eternal soul, I and you are one. This is my firm belief." And so this idea that Hanumanji is God's devotion manifest. So when the divine manifests into multiple realities as devotion, he becomes Hanuman. As feminine power becomes the great mother. As creative power becomes the great mother. So that's one verse. And then there's another verse in Tulsidas where Bharat is searching for Ram. Ram and Sita and Lakshman have left and they've gone into exile. And the brother Bharat, who was named king, didn't want to be king. He wanted Ram. And he went looking for him with his whole army because he was the king. And so Guha, the boatman who had taken Ram across the river, saw this whole army coming with Bharat and going, "I wonder what his intentions are. I'm going to defend Ram." Right? Ram is in the jungle, right? And he stops him and he says, "Who are you?" And this is to Bharat. And this is why Bharat and Hanuman are so connected. And Bharat says to him, "Who are you?" And he says, "And why are you here?" And he says, "I don't want," so the four fruits of life, sensual pleasure, spiritual merit, sensual pleasure, religious, spiritual merit, wealth, and liberation. He says, "I don't want any of those. All I want is to constantly be devoted to the feet of Ram." And so that's why Bharat and Hanuman are so connected, because they both have this job of as I'm here to fulfill devotion. I'm here to do righteousness. And so both of them are called Dharmaraj. So, and you know what Dharma is. And so Raj is a king, so the king of Dharma. And so Hanumanji is Bajrang the body who has body like lightning. He is the son of Shiva. He is the son of the wind. He is the incarnation of this. He is the incarnation of that. And they have all these different names because he takes so many, not different forms, but personalities. So many different beings, because if you're going to be devoted, you have to be ready to do anything. All of your attention, all of your effort, all of your focus is simply serving the divine in every form. And that's what Bharat says. He says, "I'm here to serve the divine in all forms." And that's Hanuman. So it's the idea that not that Hanuman is the servant of Ram. On one level, that's it. But that Hanuman represents devotion to the divine. And so that's why for so many, he becomes, he symbolizes, he's their ideal. Like for basketball players, I want to be like Mike. or nowadays Caitlin Clark, right? But for Hindus, it's the idea that to be devoted to the divine, so that all of my efforts are efforts that fulfill. All of my efforts are efforts that further goodness, that further beauty. And that for that, I can use my strength, I can use my wisdom, I can use my compassion, I can use my love. I can use all of those things. And that's really what Hanuman represents. And that's why he's so popular. And he's always orange. And the reason that he's orange, the great story is one day Sita was a Hindu woman traditionally, when she's married, she'll put sindoor, and sindoor is an orangish kind of paint, but it's not really paint, it's an orange coloring that's mixed with oil. And Hindu women put it in their part, and and Hanumanji said, "Oh mother, why are you doing this?" And he said, "Because Ram likes it when I put this on." And so then Hanuman said, "Okay, I'm going to put some on too." And he took the whole pot and poured it over his head. And that's why he's orange. But what's interesting is he has no form, and he has all forms. So I can be walking in the jungle and I see a stone and I go, wow, that's Hanuman. It could just be a round stone, it can be a flat stone, it can be just this weird shaped stone. But if I'm inspired that stone inspires me, then what I might do is I might put it up on another rock, like next to a tree. And then I might go get some sindoor. You can get it in the bazaar, and I'll go and I'll put a little on the stone. And now that has become a Hanuman shrine. And the next person that walks by, if they see that, they're going to go pick a flower and they're going to put it there and they're going to say the prayer. And before you know it, you've created another Hanuman shrine. Why? Because any form. Hanumanji can be any form. Why? Because devotion can take any form. There is no such thing as this is what form devotion is. Because devotion is intention. Why do I do what I do? That's what really determines the quality of my action. So then we get into Buddhism, intentionality. Why I do what I do is far more important than what I do. And so that's what Hanuman represents also. And that's why you can have so many different things. And I've seen Hanuman images that are 2 inches high. And I've seen Hanuman images that are 70 in central India. I mean, you can see it from, a mile away. And that's okay, because whatever form works for you, whatever concept works for you, whatever action works for you, it's your intention. If your intention is intention to serve the divine, with love, with compassion, with strength, with wisdom, with service, then you are fulfilling your dharma, and then you become like a manifestation of Hanuman's energy. Okay. Anybody have any questions? I mean, I could go on for 3 days, but.
Thank you, Ram Dass. That was amazing. I don't know anything about this. So for me, just hearing the form of devotion and the form of living the intention just brought a smile to me, because that's something I try to live, but I'd never heard the words like you're using them. So thank you. But you said something and I didn't get the center. The first one you said, as a body, I am your servant.
Yeah.
And said something else, but as an eternal soul, I and you are one. What was the middle?
The middle one is as an individual soul.
Uh-huh.
So the idea that there is Brahman, which is the ocean, and then we are each drops of the ocean.
Uh-huh.
So it's like saying, as a drop of the ocean, I am a limb of you, but as the ocean, I am you. Because we are all immersed with the divine as well as being separate. This idea that of unity and duality. So we are one with the divine and separate from the divine simultaneously. And so that's what he's referring to.
So the three were, as a body, I am your servant. As an individual soul.
So I am your limb or your extension.
Oh, okay.
And then, but as universal soul, I and you are one. And the last line, and this is my firm belief.
Wow. That's so powerful. I mean, everyone should live that. Thank you. That was
Yes,
beautiful.
thank you.
Very inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful to see how different people enact that in their lives. The little things that they do. And it's great to see people, like I'll see a shrine on the road, a shrine in the middle of, in the middle of the road, highway. And sometimes you'll see truck drivers, and when they get to the shrine, they'll stop, they'll go search for a flower, they'll go put it there, do a prayer, and then they get back in their truck and keep going. He is the patron deity of truck drivers and bus drivers. He's the patron deity of rickshaw drivers. He's the patron deity of farmers. He's the patron deity of a million different people. And they all come together that way. So there's no caste, there's no hierarchy, there's just devotion. Devotion takes all forms, and devotion is for everybody. And where we are devoted, we become equal. And there's no separation. If I think of myself as great, I'm creating separation. If I think of myself as simply a devotee of the divine, then we all sit together. Does somebody have their hand up?
Oh, hey, Ramdas,
Hi.
good to see you. I'm over in California, but
Uh-huh. Yeah, very nice. I hope you're enjoying. I heard you were there. Hope you're enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it very much. So, at the Still and Moving Center, for its entire existence every year at Deepavali or Diwali, they put on a production of the Ramayana through all forms of dance and so forth. It's
Yeah.
been I don't know how many years now, Renee, 14 years or something?
Yes.
Something like that. Anyways, it seems like always the most playful character in the production is almost always Hanuman. And this year, Murat played Hanuman and kind of stole the show a little bit. He was hilarious in his way, Murat's way. And I'm thinking that Hanuman is the exemplar of Bhakti Yoga and Dharma Yoga.
Exactly.
And sometimes, people, bhakti yogis and dharma yogis maybe take things so seriously. But Hanuman seems to be very playful about it all. Like when he's playing with the Rakshasas in Lanka and burning the place down, he's having a kind of a fun time about it.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering what you thought about this playful nature in regards to bhakti and dharma yoga.
Sure. And I'll give you an example. So the monks, and I spend a lot of time in monasteries. I mean, back in India next month. And when I'm there, I spend probably 90% of my time at monasteries with monks. And it's so different than, because I've been at Buddhist monasteries in Japan, and there's a very somberness. There's a very serious kind of ethos about the place. It's not that way at Ram Temple at all. And it's because of Hanuman. It's like, have fun, right? Your life should be fun. Even the difficulty should be fun. And so there's a festival that happens every year that I would go to and spend a month at in January in Prague, and the weather would get down to 50 degrees, 45 degrees, and we'd be laying in the sand in a tent. And then we have to get up in the morning and go to the Ganga and bathe at 4 in the morning. And I remember when I was a young monk, and sometimes I'd say to my other monastic brothers, they would get up, let's go, we're going. And we're going down to the water. And I'm saying, how long did it take you to get used to the cold? And they'd say, we're still not used to it. Let's go. Let's go suffer, enjoy it. Whatever you're going to do, enjoy it, because that's what life is about. I mean, I can go, oh, that's difficult, or I can say, oh man, that's hard. Let's do it. Let's go for it, right? And this beauty, this approach to life, that everything they do, it's like they really, there's so much joking that's going on. There's so much fun that's happening because they see that's what life is about. And Hanuman represents for them that approach to life.
Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hmm.
The Leela.
Yeah, it is. That's it. It's Leela. It's all Leela. And yeah. And when it's Leela, then we're not attached, because we know it's just a show. It's just a game. It's just a play. And it's the divine play. And if it's just a divine play and I'm just here to act it out, I mean, I always think of Shakespeare, all the world's a stage and all men and women are merely players. And he had it, and that's what we are. We're here just to act it out. And so if we're going to act it out, enjoy it. Don't take it too serious because it's just a play. And whatever happens can be good. And once again, what I said, and the idea of intention. If our intention is good, we can enjoy every single moment.
Good or bad?
Yeah, exactly. Good or bad, every moment. Yeah.
I had a question.
Jonathan?
Yeah, really liked what you're talking about, how Hanuman could be anything. And you talked about the different kinds of rocks and the configurations and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you kind of went from there into this idea that devotion can take any form.
Yeah.
And do you think if a person really embodied that this idea of devotion can take any form, and if that's true, then my acceptance of other human beings and all human beings would be more facilitated and more opened up, because devotion can take any form. Therefore, all human beings represent some kind of devotion. So therefore, anyway, what do you think?
You're exactly right. So the idea that Hanumanji says, as an individual soul, I'm a part of you. Well, all of us are individual souls. So we're all part of the divine. So everybody is divine. So when I lived in the Himalayas, I lived in a cottage in an apple orchard. And for 3.5 years, this woman that owned the orchard gave me the cottage, just said, here, you live here, do your practice. And she had a water buffalo, and I shared the cottage with the water buffalo. So I had half, the water buffalo had half. And she would come down to milk the water buffalo when it had milk. And when she would sit there, so I would see her, but she allowed me my silence and stuff when I was keeping silence. But she would come down, and whenever somebody was walking by the path, she'd always call them, come eat something. No, I'm fine. No, please come eat something. And one day I said to her, everybody who walks by, why do you always want them to come and eat with you? She says, you never know when it's going to be God. Right? She said, you never know. And so we have to treat everybody like they're God, because they could be. And the extension of that is they are, right? So if we approach life that way, then there's no hate, then there's no fear. All the stuff that, we hear about today and we don't try to avoid dealing with, but, is there. All the suffering that we see, it's all because we don't see the divine in everyone. We think there is good and evil, and the people who agree with me are good and everybody else is evil. And we've lost it. And I think what Hanumanji represents for us, and what devotion in general, as you mentioned, if I practice devotion with the idea that everything is potentially divine, we can say, okay, it's not divine. It's potentially divine. It has the essence of divinity in it. It's like, I tell my students, if I grab a piece of paper and I light it, and then I take the match away, it keeps burning. Why? And they say, because I say I took the match away. If I did that with a piece of steel and heated it, as soon as I took the match away, it wouldn't stay burning or hot. Why? And I get them the idea of inflammability, right? So the potential for fire is in the paper. The potential for fire is not in the metal. We are like the paper. We are potential for enlightenment. Every one of us have the enlightenment potential within us. All it needs to be is sparked. And so everyone I see is enlightenment in essence, maybe not in current manifestation, but in essence. And if everyone is enlightenment in essence, and therefore divinity in essence, maybe my treating them that way will be the spark for them to remember it.
Yeah.
I just want to follow up with a comment in regards to what you're just saying, Ram Dass, and Jonathan's question. It's this mystery kind of that the father of Hanuman is Vayu,
Yes.
the god of wind. And
Yes.
something I read about Hanuman was that one of the reasons maybe Vayu is the father of Hanuman is because the wind or air is everywhere. It's ubiquitous, it's universal.
Yes.
And likewise, devotion is in all beings, in all creatures have devotion.
Yep.
It's everywhere. We may be devoted to in different ways, but it's kind of like what Plato says, that every man desires the good.
Yes.
So instead of judging other people, if you just understand the direction or misdirection of their devotion, but deep down there is devotion. It's everywhere. And we can help maybe redirect someone's devotion maybe a little bit away from something that's going to just give them harm. But at essence, that devotional quality of Hanuman is in the heart of every human being, just like the air. It's necessary to breathe. We need air to breathe, but it's necessary to exist as well on a deeper plane, on a heart level, to have devotion. And without it, we are almost zombies. We're walking dead.
Yeah, very true. I was with my teacher once, and this guy came who was a devotee of his, and I found out that he had been a murderer, and he had been a gangster. He was kind of ran the gang in this one neighborhood, and he had murdered a variety of people. He had never gone to jail. The police were afraid of him, and he had bought them off. And then my Guruji heard about him and called for him. And came, and basically he came to see my Guruji, and he said, "Why do you do what you do? Stop it. I don't want you to do it anymore." Right? And he said it with such power. He said, if I stop, people will now kill me. And he said, well, you got to stop. You got to figure it out. And so he became an honest gangster, in the sense that he stopped killing people and he stopped doing things wrong, but he still put on that air, and people stayed afraid of him. And then slowly they came to realize that he wasn't actually doing that more, and he had become devotee of this teacher. And so they kind of let it go. But I remember asking my teacher, why did you decide to take him on as a disciple? And he says, I would rather deal with a murderer than a lazy person. They all got energy. The lazy person doesn't even do anything with it. At least this person has energy. Let's just redirect. You know, it's like if you're on a mule and it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. If you're on a horse that's a wild horse, at least you can move the direction of it, right? And you can learn to control it. And so he says, it's great to have energy. And we see all these people with misdirected energy. So let's just redirect it. Let's start with our own energy and redirect it. And if I can redirect my own energy, then maybe I can inspire others to redirect their energy. And so everybody's energy has the potential of becoming seva, of becoming goodness, of becoming beauty and service and compassion. It's just, once again, intention. Tulsidas writes, he who turns to me his face from lifetimes of sufferings will be erased. the idea, we just change the direction. And as soon as we go in the right direction, now we're going in the right direction.
Simple as that.
Simple. Forgiveness, right? It's really about forgiveness. I mean, you know, I've talked to people and they say, I've done, 'cause I worked in a prison for many years, and people say, I can't, I have done so much wrong. And I go, that was yesterday. That's not today. Right? Today's a new day. Today's your new life. Start today. And yesterday was yesterday. So we each need to be reborn every day, die to our old lives, and be reborn to a life of beauty, a life of care, a life of acceptance, acceptance of others, acceptance of all others, and their beauty out in whatever form it gets manifested, whether it gets manifested as a poor person or a rich person, that doesn't matter. As somebody who's strong or somebody who's weak, everybody has a heart. Everybody has the ability to do something beautiful.
Question for David. David, you're doing such a deep study of psychology and graduating with a master's in it within the next week or so. And I wonder, are there aspects of the psychology that you've studied that have room for this Hanuman-like devotion?
Well, funny you should ask. I was just thinking with that last comment about just sort of turning one's face to the divine is what we would call cognitive reframing or cognitive restructuring, just changing the way that you think about the situation as a way of completely shifting your perspective, which then leads to different behaviors. And again, if you're looking for the good in someone, you're sure to find it, and vice versa. So yeah, I think it all directly applies. I kind of wish more of my clients were at the place where I could speak in these more philosophical terms. I'm advised by my supervisor that I should bring it down into a little more human terms. But I think all of these spiritual principles definitely apply in the field. I think psychology is just a modernized version of the wisdom of the philosophical teachings. Anyway, I did want to ask for those that are present about what I love about gems of the wisdom traditions is how we often translate these fundamental principles into the various wisdom traditions. So I'm curious what happened to Leela when Gautama decided to, well, I don't know that he decided to create Buddhism, but when Buddhism was created, how did that translate into the Buddhist philosophy? This idea of playfulness, because it doesn't seem it's as present in Buddhist thought as it is in Hindu thought. So I was curious, some of the Buddhists in the group might have a reflection on that.
Whether we have many Buddhists represented right now. Ramdas, do you have any thoughts you'd like to lend?
I do, and I think because I've spent a lot of time with Tibetan Buddhists and with Japanese Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists in India and Japanese Buddhists in Japan. And I think what has happened is this idea that the Buddha said, just get enlightened, right? Just focus, get enlightened. I mean, I don't think the Buddha came with the idea that he was going to start a religion. I don't think any of
Right.
our leaders came with the idea they were going to start. They just came with an idea. They had realizations and they shared those realizations. And if I get the teachings and I put them to practice and I get the realization, that's what it's about. But if I just get these teachings and before I know it, I start saying, oh, but you have different, you understand the teachings differently and you understand the teachings differently. And unfortunately, within probably 100 years of the life of the Buddha, already we had so many denominations of Buddhism and they all disagreed with each other. And they focused on this is the right way rather than they're all right. And I mean, and I think so there's a little bit of that sectarianism that is a part of the Buddhist tradition and the idea that we have to take life serious. I totally agree. And the most important way to take life serious is enjoy it.
Very nice. Yeah, and I'm reflecting on those brief moments that I would call enlightenment in my own life. They've all been very joyous and playful.
Exactly. And David, the one thing I wanted to mention, in reflection of what you were saying, what I've noticed with my students is, and I notice a lot of students have psychological issues today. Before it used to be every semester I might have one that had issues that I had to deal with. Now it's so many all the time. And what it is, and so I asked them, I go, what's going on in your lives? And they're all afraid. They're afraid of the future. And so we need to teach our young people to not be afraid, to enjoy, to go out and do it. And I think that things like the gems, and I think what we're doing, this is satsang, right? We all know it's satsang, and this is what we're doing. We're doing satsang. So they need satsang. They don't have organized religion because they've rejected it because of all the stuff that came with it, all the baggage. But now they have nothing. And they need something. And so listening to just, the stuff that we all talk about, the stuff that you folks talk about every week, is what our people, what's our young people, what everybody needs. We need people to remind us what goodness is, to remind us the prevalence of goodness, the availability of goodness, the availability of love and beauty, the availability of care. I have seen this, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, where we see an innocent being, whether it's a puppy or a kitten or a child, when in danger, people will stop to help immediately. Why? Not my child, not my dog, not my cat. It's because we respect life. And life, in that case, is raw. When we see a child or a puppy or something like that, it's just raw life. It's beautiful. It's innocence in its manifestation. And we all see the divinity in that. We just need to, as we were talking earlier, I think something Cliff mentioned, is we just need to, as maybe with Jonathan, we just need to see it in everybody. We just need to acknowledge that beauty is in every being. And create our own moral structure. I ask my students sometimes, where did you get your moral structure? And I can't tell you how many of them say, what's that? I don't even know what I'm talking about. That's difficult, right? And we have to encourage them to find a moral structure, whatever that is. I tell my students, if you like the Easter Bunny, if you believe in the Easter Bunny, and that causes you to be a good person, then go Easter Bunny, right? Whatever makes you good, whatever inspires you.
Eriko, I don't know whether you're able to come forward, but you are someone who has been in our Ramayana play. You have played the part of the demon deer who lured Ram into Ram into the forest.
Maricha.
So that, yes, Ravana could come and take Sita. But you also had your little son in the play once or twice. And I wonder, do you know whether he had a favorite character, and was it Hanuman? Or anything else you might want to mention, but I did have that wondering.
Yeah, I believe so. Hanuman is like most amazing, fascinating character. Yeah. And then we all enjoy being the play, and it's so memorable. And just I enjoy the Ramdas talk today. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Eric. A long time.
Yeah, and then it's just a foundational belief with come with Hanuman's, and then yeah, for everybody. It's so great to hear. And yeah.
I mentioned this to Renee the other day. Actually, the first place in the ancient chants of India, in the Vedas, a being, probably the roots of Hanuman, appear in the Rig Veda. And Indra, the lord of the gods, is object of a great deal of worship. But then many people are worshiping this sacred monkey. And his wife, Indra's wife, says to Indra, "Aren't you upset that they're worshiping him rather than you?" And Indra says, "We're all in it together." Right? I mean, this is so very early on, we have this idea that divinity manifested as a monkey can be great, and even the Lord of the gods sees it. So it's great to see that idea that nature is also divine. That's how I interpret that. The early realization that all the beings of nature have divinity in them, just like everything. So
David.
Yes, I just see Mary shifting in her seat, and I just wanted to call on her. Speaking of devotion, one of the most devoted people I know to her faith, and also being a mother of some amazing children. And I'm thinking from a practical standpoint, something you brought up, Ramdas, was about children and how do we go about cultivating moral character in a culture that seems to have kind of turned away from, and I'm thinking that a mother would know best as to how to cultivate that within children. It would be great for me because that adolescent group is probably where I'm going to focus my practice. So looking for any words from Mary and anyone else that can offer me some guidance.
Oh, thanks a lot, David. And thank you, Ram Dass. It's really a wonderful sharing that's happening. And I see so many parallels with Jesus
yes.
and Hanuman. And a couple of things that I had to write down. I love the playfulness. I love looking for the good in everything. Even when your house burns down, you can look at it as Pele, and as her lava goes through the landscape, and then eventually the lava breaks through, and the lehua grows, ferns grow. It's amazing how quickly that can happen after a tragedy. So yeah, it's very, very wonderful to see parallels. I also love what you said about your landlady who would tell everybody, come, come, because it reminded me about how Jesus said, what you do to the least of my people, you do to me. So there
Absolutely.
is that
Absolutely.
divine in everything, not
Yes.
just humans, not just trees, but in everything, even the rocks.
Yeah.
I just, that's just wonderful. Um, thinking or answering or addressing what Dave has to say or question about children, you try to give them a structure or something that they can fall back on, even if they turn from what you believe, what you trying to instill in them. They know. I constantly tell my kids I'm praying for them,
Mhm.
even if they don't go to church, even if I don't see them doing things that I would want them to do. They volunteer, they help out. You make that strong foundation, and you have to let them go. I mean, it's like birds who are in the nest. They sit on their eggs hatch, and then the kids have to fly out on their own. And the parents will be there encouraging them, supporting them as much as they can. But there's just so much that we have to allow to happen, and constantly, yes, I'm constantly praying. And just to let everybody know, Malia texted me that she's in Charlotte, and the next adventure she's going to have is train trip from Charlotte up to Connecticut. So she's bringing back all the times I would pray for her when there was no cell phone coverage and she was off on adventures. And the same is true with my son and with my grandchildren. You know, you just, if you tell them you love them, and you will do whatever you can to help them, and even when you are not able to physically help them, you can certainly help them in your prayers. Amen.
Malia, you're probably familiar with Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. And in that, and he mentions about children, right? And he uses that metaphor, that idea of the arrow and the bow. We are the bow, right? And we aim our children like the arrow. Once we let go, we let go. But we aim them in the correct direction, right? And that's what we do. Yeah, hopefully. Well, no, but like what you're doing and what you have done, I'm sure, is you give them a moral structure and then you say, go with it. It's yours now, right? And you learn to follow it. And that's all we can do. We can't force them. We try to we inspire them and then we let them go. And hopefully that inspiration will guide them.
Well, I like what you also said, because the part about we are just a piece of paper and we're waiting for that flame to ignite us. So that's the same thing that happens with every person we come in contact with, whether we know it or not. We can either be that flame that enlightens, or we can discourage, and we don't know. So it's been a lifelong learning experience. To sometimes we just got to shut up.
Yeah.
But I am going to call on Cliff to speak up. I see he has his hand, and I'm going to ask Anna to maybe have a chance to weigh in after that if she wants to volunteer. Yeah, Cliff?
Just addressing a little bit more David's question about how do we inculcate or teach morality to children. I was thinking that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata is just stories, and stories and stories and stories, but woven through all the stories is moral teaching. And it seems like as human beings, we're just all suckers for stories, especially children. They're just, I think these sages of India understood that through stories, you'll get an attentive audience, and then you can filter in like the spoonful of sugar into it. This is the story, but in the medicine of morality is woven or poured into that story. And it's said that Hanuman was the original Superman.
Yes.
You know, but this idea of stories about heroes, heroism, and how they live their life in a playful but powerfully ethical way is something that we all resonate to fundamentally, I think.
Yeah. And let me add just one more thing. Hanuman is one of the only deities in kind of the major tradition who doesn't have a female counterpart, right? Who is unmarried. And the reason for that is, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I think I'm back now. All right. The reason for that is that he's ever a child. You know, it's that idea of have that childlike innocence, like Jesus said, until you become like a child, you can never enter the gates of heaven. And Hanuman represents kind of that childlike innocence that do it. Don't think of yourself as great. You are strong because you have all of divinity within you, but don't think of yourself as great. Be humble, be simple, be like a child. And that's why Hanuman is not married, because he represents ever ready. One of the things they say is ever ready to do Ram's work. That's one of the ways you refer to.
You.
Do you have time for another question? Or
Let me see if Anna wants to weigh in first. Yeah.
You can go ahead, Jonathan, and then
no,
I,
Anna
yeah.
first. You
Okay, well, I have a big question, so I don't know if this will be totally answerable fully in this short amount of time, but I wanted to thank you, Ram Dass. This has been really interesting. I don't think that we've met before.
No, hi Anna, nice to meet
Hi,
you.
nice to meet you. I did not know a lot about Hanuman before today and Diwali at the center, but just based off all you guys are saying about this deity, I think I would really like him. And I was curious, Ram Dass, one of the things that stood out to me was first when you mentioned that you can find your own way of devotion, and it can be something that is seemingly small or seemingly large, but it's really what's inside of you and that intentionality that matters. And I really appreciate that. And also when you talked about finding like your moral compass and your moral structure, I was just wondering, since I don't know that much about you yet, I was wondering about how you discovered your moral compass, and then if that's been challenged kind of in a great way at some certain point of your life.
Very briefly, I was raised in a poor family. My mother was a maid and worked at a Catholic church. And then they had a school. And so she was able to get me into the school because she was a maid there, and she was like the janitor there at the church. So I was raised going to Catholic school. I wanted to be a priest. I read Gandhi when I was 8 years old, a child's book of Gandhi, and it changed my life. And I decided I wanted to go to India, and I ended up in India. And I wanted, like I said, I wanted to be a priest, and then I ended up in India as a monk, and I found it was all the same stuff. And that I just found finding goodness worked for me, right? Finding myself and the goodness within so that I could share it with others was what became meaningful. And there was nothing else that seemed to be important, because everything else came and went. And I noticed that you give me a possession and I love it. I go, oh, Anna gave me this wonderful thing. And 10 minutes later, I'm down to something else. But if you help somebody, that feeling stays with you far more than if somebody gives you something. So it's interesting. If I give you something, that stays with me longer than if you give me something. And so this idea that giving others is just a really amazing way to be happy.
Very clever.
Yeah. And so I found that worked, right? And so that's what I've tried to do. And that's why I became a teacher, is so that I can share with others and learn in the process. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I found.
It does, thank you.
Great.
Jonathan, you had a comment.
Oh, well, I'm glad that Anna asked her question first, because mine's very similar. You've mentioned several times this idea of intentionality and purity of motive and so forth. Do you think that's what gives his purity of motive and his pure devotion to the divine. Do you think that's what helps him with his flexibility about who he can become? Because he can be so small, he can be so large. He can take on these different roles, it seems like.
th- It's interesting. Buddhists will say that there is no God, but there is consciousness. They call it chitta, right? That's what I call the divine, right? Is consciousness. And consciousness has no ego. Consciousness is all knowing. Ego defines us. In other words, when you define, you separate. So ego small makes things small. When we ego identify, we become small. When we let go of our ego, we become huge. If the divine is all conscious and therefore no ego, it's all goodness. And so no need to worry about self, because the ego is the great self is the divine. And so everything, one of my teachers said, every moment, everything that happens is simply the divine expressing spontaneous joy.
Can you say it again so I can write it down?
Sure. Every moment. I asked him, I said, does God have a plan? And he laughed. He said, every moment is a spontaneous outburst of God's joy.
Love it. I am going to ask you a question, Ram Dass, knowing that it's 4 o'clock.
Sure.
And the reason I'm asking this, and people, if you need to, move on because you've got your day planned, I totally get it. We will, in a few weeks for Sita's birthday, be taking up the study of Sita. And one of the questions that I already know is going to come up during that conversation, because it came up last week in the conversation about Rama, was this question of Rama questioning Sita's purity, not just once but twice.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think I understand from you, and I'd like you to elucidate this for all of us, that you don't feel that that is the original way that the Ramayana story went.
Mhm.
It's the second one, but I don't know about the first. But I think you don't believe that Ram questioned her purity after he rescued her from the Demon King's
Mhm.
palace. And when he questioned her purity, she's said to have said, if I am impure and I walk into this fire, I'll be burned up. If I'm pure, I'll walk into this fire and I won't be burned up.
Mhm.
And she walks in and she's not burned.
Yeah.
But you don't think that's the original storyline, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, tell us about that.
Okay, so first of all, there's an interesting book called Homer and Rama, and it was written by a guy in the 1920s, comparing things from Homer that we find in the Ram story. Homer was 8th century BCE, 300 years at least before Valmiki, which means the Ram story was an oral tradition long before it got written down. And once it got written down by priests in Sanskrit, who had a hierarchy, and in their hierarchy, women were less. And so making Ram great is obviously, but also showing the female as being subservient was very important to the priests. And so their version of the Ram story put that situation. So greater than Sita is the Brahmanical laws. The Ananda Ramayana rejects that. The Adhyatma Ramayana, which is the spiritual, I mean, literally spiritual Ramayana, Adhyatma Ramayana, 14th century, amazing, absolutely amazing. Sita is the divine mother. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. That's what Tulsidas got. And neither of those is that second story about her being banned into the forest. They both reject that. It's just not. That's not a part of the lived tradition. That was a part of the Brahmanical way of keeping women in their place.
Both, right after she was rescued and then later on in life, their life on the throne. Both of them are
Yeah.
that weren't part of the original.
Yeah, it's just it's a way of it's establishing their hierarchy, right? And that's why in my tradition we just reject those. No, listen, how can the Divine Mother ever be diminished? Right? It's just, come on. Haven't you ever had a mother?
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I know you'll be in India when we're studying Sita, so you won't be there as a reference.
I'll be thinking about you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just want to thank you, Ramdas, for bringing so much heart, so much soul to our satsang together, as you say, to Gems from the Wisdom tradition, and taking something that somebody could study as, you know, something from some ancient book a long time ago, but just bringing it into our lives. And how do we live our lives? And
Yeah.
how do we attempt to bring that devotion for the divine in a way that is playful and that extends to everyone? How inspiring.
And once again, thank you for doing this Gems tradition. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs it. We all need to be inspired. We all need to find a moral compass wherever we find it. And the beauty of it is, I mean, I have spent time with Catholic monks and Buddhist monks and Jain monks and Shinto monks. And you know what? We're all doing the same thing, and they all understand it. We're all here to make the world a better place. We're all here to serve beauty and divinity, and the external names just become useful, but not relevant. The divine is relevant. Divinity and goodness are relevant, and everything else is secondary. So I think what you're doing is very important, and we need more of that.
We need all of you. Thank you all so much. I will let you know that next week we are taking up the topic from the unreal to the real. And we're going to take that up from the theosophical tradition with a speaker who's spoken also for us on several previous occasions, John Powers. So we'll look forward to as many of you as possible being here. I want to especially thank our brothers and sisters in San Diego who took up this topic the hour and a half preceding Gems from the Wisdom tradition. So, you know, doing that continuity of staying for both of these meetings. I really appreciate you doing that. Thank you all so much. Aloha.
Aloha.
Namaste.
Thank you, Ramdas.
Thank you. Thank you.